right, Jared, top of the morning to you.
Good morning. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. And we got an episode that we've been talking about for a bit now. We are real excited. Jared and I have spent weeks, months, years talking about this, and it's finally come to fruition. Jared, what we got going on today before we get into it?
We are going to be giving the people what they want, and we're going to be doing a little book club today.
Right.
Joshua?
And you know what? For those that didn't think we could read, guess what? We can. Or we can try. We can try.
Figuring it out.
We're figuring it out as we go. So, we spent a long time. We spent a lot of hours trying to figure out what kind of name should we give our book club. Armchair Analysis Book Club. We've had all these like really creative ideas. And Jared, what did we actually settle with?
Like you said, man, we got really creative. We put a lot of pen to paper. I think we spent probably a good 3-hour brainstorming session on this one. And at the end of the day, I think we went with book club.
What?
Keep it simple, stupid. You know what I mean?
Kiss method, baby. I love it. So yeah, we are so excited to get into that. And
what do you got there, Joshua? What's that?
So what I have in my hands here is the official Armchair Analysis merch. Actually, the first piece, if I recall, I think this is given to me by my co-host, and had no idea I was getting it. Basically got a package in the mail. Could have come from a stalker, could have been a bomb. I have no idea. Turns out it was from Jared. It was something completely unexpected. I don't know if it was a birthday gift that he had missed from years past, or he was just a late comer to Christmas. Either way, we've got our first piece of merchandise. It's a mug with Armchair Analysis. And even better, this is how sentimental Jared is, and this is why I love the guy, is he threw a picture of us back in the day. Jared, how old is this? I mean,
gotta be maybe freshman, sophomore in high school.
Yeah, we're young. We are so young.
Yeah, we're young.
And that just shows, I mean, that's how long Jared and I have been friends. We're still going strong. And again, it all comes, this whole idea came from being friends for years and having a lot of experience. And part of that, again, is this book club. We are excited to kind of go through this journey of life, together, but also with you guys and book club. We're kind of going out of our comfort zone here. I am one of those people, I don't read a lot. I know I should be, but I don't. And I'm more, when I do read, it's going to be something like fiction. It's, obviously Harry Potter's a great one, but I also like, the thrillers, the detective type books. Jared, what's kind of your flavor?
Yeah, I'm polar opposite. I like the nonfiction, self-improvement. What can I learn from this? How is this going to add immediate value to my life type of reading, which Josh was nice enough to let me have the first choice of what we read this time around, which was right up that alley. And we'll get it. Should we get it pulled up? Should we get it pulled up and tell the people what we're chatting about today?
Let's get into it.
So the first choice, for those of you that are just tuning in to our podcast and didn't get a chance to see previous episodes, the book that we chose for book club this month is David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds, which phenomenal book, in my opinion. Was a really fun read, a really interesting read, and provided or really forced you to have a lot of introspection about what's going on in your own life. And what I thought that was really good about this book was how David Goggins was able to take real life examples and kind of take you through his life in order to instill, implement, and just get you talking and thinking about ways that you can maybe turn your own situation around and maximize your own potential. Right? He takes us through his childhood, a extremely rough childhood, And what I highly recommend people do if they get the chance, Josh, is try to find some interviews of David Goggins as well, where he's talking about the book, because he talks about how hard it was for him to really kind of go back into his mind and bring these topics up again. And just through writing about his childhood was another way of him really overcoming some mental hurdles in his life, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, he takes us through his childhood. He takes us through just a lot of the ups and downs that went on with his family, having an abusive father, having a mother who is present and loving, but doesn't know how to handle that situation of having a spouse who is abusive and just not a good person, honestly, at the end of the day. So he takes us through how he gets through that phase of his life, right? And then he's able to get on to the next phase, but really isn't much. He kind of doesn't have any goals in life, isn't really thinking long term. It's all short term. What do I have to do tomorrow to make a couple bucks just to get by? Which eventually leads him into the military, going through again more hurdles through that next phase of his life, and how he overcomes those other hurdles, right? And it's just kind of this perpetual cycle of growing, learning, evolving, being able to learn from his mistakes to then further evolve again. And it's interesting, man. It's just a really, really interesting read there. Now, I have a question for you, Josh, before we kind of really dive into the book here. Question for you and question for the listeners. Yeah. When you were going through this book, did you feel like, as he went through his childhood, as he went through his time in the military, as he went through his time post-military, as he becomes the endurance athlete that everybody knows him to be, did you have any moments of saying, I wish I would have done certain things differently when I was a kid, or what can I do going forward to make up for the times that I maybe didn't exceed to my fullest potential when I was younger?
Yeah, I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, being able to look back and say like, wow, if I would have just done XYZ different, maybe I would have been, in a completely different area, different place in life. But honestly, you can't, again, just how David Goggins is talking about how his past shaped him. Like, I'm a believer, like, yeah, have I been through some trials and tribulations? Sure, as has most people. But at the end of the day, like, that is what shaped, or that is, what shaped me. And that is why I'm the person I am today. So like, I am a believer, kind of like the David Goggins mindset. Like, I don't think I would trade my past. I don't think I would do anything different, just because like, I do feel like I'm in a place in life where like, hey, things could be different, but they're the way they are. And, I'm like, I like to think I'm more like forward thinking, it's like, okay, I did some shitty stuff like in my past. Like, what can I make? How can I make up for that? What can I do to better myself in the next 10, 20 years? Right. So yeah, rather than looking in the past, I try and be forward thinking,
And I think that's what's powerful, right? Is exactly that. Cause I definitely had those moments when I was reading the book and trying my best to immediately shift that conversation with myself, is shift that focus, shift that mindset to being, okay, let's learn from it. If it means we got to write it down, if it means we got to say it out loud, if it means we just need to have some good one-on-one meditation to analyze it, and then to set course, just almost like putting once you've analyzed it, you've tried to learn from it, put it behind you and just set course to the future, right? And that kind of speaks right to this quote that I think really spoke to you, which says the most important conversations you'll ever have are the ones you'll have with yourself. You wake up with them, you walk around with them, you go to bed with them, and eventually you act on them, whether they be good or bad. Now, tell the people, Josh, a little bit how and why that quote spoke to you.
Yeah, I think this is important because, I think everyone forgets that like everyone's living their own lives, right? In their head, they're their own main character, right? But everyone thinks I feel like people forget that, like, Jared, you've got thoughts in your head that I don't know, but we're all going through battles. We're all, again, I don't want to use trials and tribulations again, but we're all going through certain things. And it's like, at the end of the day, you are the only one that knows what's going on in your head, right? They say, like, when it comes to like healthcare, you're your biggest advocate, right? You know when something's wrong with you. It's the same thing with like your mind. Like, no one else knows what's actually going through your head. Like, you're the one that has to go through, those conversations, those battles day after day. So I think this is powerful, right? Like, sometimes people are a little bit more vocal, and that, if they have issues and they have problems, they're able to kind of like get it out there in the ether. Whereas like other people, again, bury stuff, right? They hold on to trauma, to stress, to, things that, maybe negativity or positivity. Maybe they hang on to that and don't necessarily like share it with the world. So I don't know. I think that the reason I like this quote is because I think this is what makes, people is like, we don't know what everyone's going through. And I think, just being able to give yourself some grace, give other people grace, right? Because same thing, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they're battling. So I really like this quote. I really like this quote.
Yeah, it's a solid quote, man. And I think that those conversations or this quote, what it really speaks to about those conversations that we have with ourselves is just really highlighting how important that we have the right conversation with ourselves. And everybody's different, right? But really making sure you're giving yourself some positive self-talk, some positive motivation, some positive, hey man, some positive accountability, right? Where you can say, hey man, what you did was wrong. All right, let's correct it. All right. And then we move on from it. So just making sure that you're having not just conversations with yourself, because like you said, you are your own biggest advocate. Nobody's going to care about the situation you're going through more than you do. It's impossible. Right. And so just making sure that you're having the right healthy conversations with yourself in order to overcome whatever you might need to overcome and just succeed in life in general. Now, for me, I love this quote because I also literally talk to myself. I'm probably crazy, but I literally talk to myself. So this definitely spoke to me. But yeah, I thought that was funny. Now, for those of you, we haven't even really gotten into the weeds of this book yet. Excuse me. But for those of you tuning in, again, our first book that we chose was David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. Highly, highly recommend you going ahead and pick it up. If you feel like just already this book might be able to speak to you and have a positive impact on your life, highly recommend you go purchase this book. Josh, let them know where they should get this book if they're trying to help a couple brothers out.
Borders. I'm just kidding. Didn't Borders get shut down? Isn't Borders like defunct now?
Maybe. I forgot about them. Damn.
I was trying to think like, Borders, I was trying to think of something that kind of went out of business, but we have our own Amazon link, yeah, we get a couple cents from it, but again, just, every little bit counts, we're just trying to put bread on the table. Am I right, Jared?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Go on ahead and help us out. Right. You guys can get this book from anywhere. But if you happen to want to get the book now, right, you can go to our Amazon affiliate link and grab the book there. We'll have it in the description of this video as you're watching it on YouTube. You can also go to our Instagram page, give us a follow there as well. And you should see the link for this in our bio. All right, man. Can we dive deep? Can we dive deep into this thing?
We can. Yeah. Let me summarize this book real quick for those.
Okay.
Let me summarize the book for those that didn't, either are a little bit slower to read it or just haven't read it and, or just need a recap. So again, you kind of see David Goggins, in his early life, he's watching his brother get beat, his mom get beat. He himself is getting beat by his abusive father. His father is his father is like the owner of, I think, like a roller rink. And, he's maybe got some shady business on the side, but he's just a terrible human being. He's actively cheating on his wife, and David's watching this. Young little David's watching this. And thankfully, the mom got her and her kids out. Unfortunately, it didn't work for the brother. The brother ended up back with the father, but David stayed with his mom, and
Yeah.
it's very evident how powerful, like how influential his mom is on him. And for two mama's boys, like that speaks volumes, right? We love our moms, and obviously they're very, very influential in our lives too. So, seeing his mom just like, pick herself literally out of the gutter and like overcome, he had a lot of help from, I think it was his grandparents too. And, he ended up in this like podunk town in the middle of nowhere, a lot of racism. He wasn't the best student. He struggled through school, finally got through school. I think he said he couldn't really read well, or he couldn't write. Like he struggled with like some of the basics. But again,
yeah, he would just lean on kind of cheating to get by. It was easier to be the class clown who didn't really care about school, tried to have this perception of didn't really care what people thought of him. But just because that's what he wanted people to perceive doesn't mean that's was true.
Yeah. So again, got through school. I think he ended up being like an exterminator, and he was overweight. The amount of food that he would say he would eat before dinner was just an absurd amount. This is coming from a registered dietitian. It was pretty nauseating how much this man would eat. And he said he was overweight. He again, kind of, you could just tell he hated himself, like truly. And whether or not uh it seemed like there was no end in sight. He was in like a marriage that he didn't seem like was very fulfilling. He was at a job that he didn't like. And you just watch this man like at the very end just like hit a wall, and was like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this for my life. And he met with like a recruiter with the Navy SEALs, and the guy's just like, dude, you got to pass certain exams, so physical and mental. And it basically it lit a fire with David. He got through. He really, like, the amount of weight he lost in the amount of time, again, as a registered dietitian, is not healthy. I do not recommend going the David Goggins route, but he lost a lot of weight. He achieved his goals. He set a list of goals and he achieved them. And it took him, Jared, was it 3 tries to finally get into the SEALs? The first time he got like, they pulled him for having, the first time they pulled him, the second time, I think they pulled him again. And then the third time he finally made it through. So this isn't like, the guy didn't just like have everything handed to him. It's not like every goal he set out, he achieved immediately. He had to work for it. He failed, right? They tell you, you have to fail sometimes to succeed. And that is exactly what David did. So, post SEALs, or, still in the SEALs, but they got really into exercise. I mean, this man decided, hey, I want to do, he wanted to raise money for his fallen brethren, and decided, hey, I'm going to raise money by doing these 100-mile runs. And again, which to me is just absolutely absurd. The first run, I think he ended up having kidney failure because he wasn't disciplined, right? I think he was exercising before. He was doing like squats and like bench presses.
Yeah, he was really into powerlifting. Yeah. And then he went and did the San Diego, and he won it, and he thought he was a badass, right? And so he was like, I don't, not only did I not train for this, but I'm gonna go max out on some Olympic lifts the night before with an old, I think, CO of his. I think, and this was before doing I don't know if this race is still around. We should look that up, but our people in the chat, look it up and let us know if it's still around. But the San Diego 1 day, I think it's what it's called. And it's you do a loop around one track, and you just do as many as you can in 24 hours. And in order to get into that race you were talking about, he had to successfully get, what was it? 100 miles in 24 hours or less. Right.
To move on to the next one. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Either way, again, this man, didn't have, I think he was drinking protein shakes, didn't have any like sort of like salt packets, any sort of like rehydration. And at the end, he was peeing blood or what he thought was blood, but it turned out to be like, again, just some gross discharge from his kidneys. And from there, he started wising up. He's like, actually, there's a lot to be said about like, again, being disciplined and nutrition. So he kind of took that, he got more serious with that. And, eventually he turned to his goal was he wanted to do the Death Valley race, right? The ultra marathon in the Death Valley. But in order to qualify, is he had to have a certain number of like ultra marathons before that. So he did one in Hawaii, which, he said was it to me, that sounded more grueling than the one in Death Valley. It sounded like he struggled with that more than the one in Death Valley personally. And again, David Goggins being David Goggins successfully completed it, had to really push like the board who was accepting or like taking applicants for this Death Valley race. And, he had a lot of people going out to bat for him so he could do it. Cause no one knew who he was, there's these ultra marathon runners, I guess, it was a pretty tight knit group and he wasn't part of that group. So he had to make a name for himself and fast. And they eventually let him in. He, trained again, David Goggins being David Goggins. He is like training in, I think he said he would like turn the heat up, wear like all kinds of like winter gear in the middle of the summer, like training for this Death Valley race, because when it gets like 120 degrees, you're in the middle of the desert. You're doing like, what is it, like 5,000 feet of like elevation raise. So, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. Like I'm sure people have died like doing this race, and David Goggins successfully did it. But again, David Goggins being David Goggins is never satisfied. He is never satisfied. So he decided, hey, he's continuously doing all this stuff to again raise money, and decided, hey, I want to take it another step further. I want to set records. I want to keep doing these ultra marathons, but like I want to be showcased. And he got into pull-ups, right? He was, I think, on live TV trying to beat the pull-up record. Again, people are donating while he's doing this. He's trying to get as many as he can in 24 hours. And Jared, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had to basically do one every 10 seconds in order to beat the record, which again, doesn't sound like a lot. One every 10 seconds. Okay, pull up, that's 1 second. Now you can rest. But it's like, think of doing that every 10 seconds for 24 hours, Yeah. And he eventually, like, he got to the point where he couldn't and he failed. But what does he do? He tries and he tries again, And again, I think that's what this book is. He continuously is like pushing his body to the limits. He's pushing his mind to the limits, like beyond the normal capabilities, like, or what he thought was possible. So again, I didn't think I was going to like this book, Jared. You picked this book, and his story is fascinating. So I highly encourage, if you've seen David Goggins, if you've heard him speak, if you just like, want to see some badass's story, like it is crazy. Jared, did I miss anything in that summary?
No, I think you gave a good summary of like the personal things that he's been through and had to overcome. You did a good gist of that. And I think what I'm really excited for us to dive into is the messaging behind the examples that he provided, right? Like he does provide a lot of really just wild examples of how he himself overcame a lot of personal trauma. But I think what's just as important, if not more important, which we're about to get into, and I'm excited, is his messaging behind the examples that he provides. So let's go ahead and roll into that next. Okay. So going over that Goggins mindset, right? And one of the things that he reiterates a lot throughout this book and throughout a lot of the talks that he gives is callousing the mind, sharpening and hardening your mind, right? So whenever you hear David Goggins screaming, saying, stay hard, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about having a strong, stable mindset. Right now, we have a couple I'm sorry?
I said, yeah, get your mind out of the gutter if you're thinking other things.
Exactly. Now, a couple of quotes that we found that really help speak to this is one, if you guys are listening and following along with your book, and if not, then if you're listening but once you get the book later, you want to be able to go back to it. This first quote is on page 114, and it goes, life is a mind game. No matter how bad the pain gets, no matter how harrowing the torture, all bad things end. And another quote that kind of follows up with that perfectly, in our opinion, which is on page 256, is the point is not to allow a setback to shatter our focus or our detours to dictate our mindset. Always be ready to adjust, recalibrate, and stay after it to become better somehow. And so when we talk about callousing the mind, part of it is understanding that whatever it is you're going through in the moment, no matter how bad it is, it will get better. And that can really help when you're trying to callous your mind, and just reminding yourself that whatever pain, whatever torture, whatever personal trauma you're going through, it is going to be temporary. And then just reminding ourselves that, hey, we're in a moment of a setback. We're actively dealing with the setback, whatever this pain and this trauma may be. But it does not have to completely take us off track, right? Yes, it may cause a detour. Yes, it may cause us to reroute our way to the destination, but nonetheless, we can still get to that destination. Now, again, Josh, you mentioned perfectly how, the Goggins version of this was doing some pretty intense stuff, which I think is super impressive. I think it's awesome. I think he defies our typical laws of how the human body works and what it can handle personally. But how do we draw that for the average person? How do we draw that to relate to everyday life? Do you have any fun examples of that?
How to relate what to everyday life? Just
his Goggins mindset of callousing the mind, right? What does that look like in everyday life? How do we take his perspective on callousing the mind and put that into our own day to day?
That's a great question. Jared, do you have any ideas? I truly don't. I think the callousing the mind, in my opinion, was one of the things I thought was like, I don't necessarily agree with David on, because I think like, yeah, I guess it's like, everything is a mind game. You want to like harden yourself to be prepared for what's next. But again, I don't know. This didn't necessarily stick with me. Did you have some ideas on what the people can do?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that it relates to everyday life, or at least my everyday life, I won't assume for other people's, is even just in the little things, right? And so you get up in the morning and you don't want to go for that walk, or you don't want to go to the gym. And so you tell yourself, today I'm going to sleep in, or and this is somebody who's in a situation where they know they should, right? They know they need to, they know they should. And so just callousing the mind and overcoming that short term, that temporary comfort zone of, I can do it tomorrow, I can do it later. Yeah, I didn't eat super healthy yesterday or the day before, but it wasn't that bad, right? And really overcoming some of those internal abilities to hold yourself back, and overcoming that and saying, no, I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to get through this short-term limitation I'm providing for myself, and we're going to overcome that. And then when it comes to just, not allowing a certain setback to limit you full time and limit you permanently, right? I think a great example of that is you get injured, all right? We've all gone through, whether they're minor or whether they're severe. I won't speak to somebody who is, everybody has to deal with their own injuries, their own ways. But I think, in my perspective, one of the things Goggins is talking about here when he's saying not allowing a setback to completely shatter our focus, he's saying, okay, well, let's not let a setback completely limit us from wanting to do the things we want to do. Now, we might have to get extremely creative, right? Depending on how severe that injury may be. We might have to lose the idea of doing it the way that we initially planned. But for most people, right? Maybe not for everybody, but for most people, for your average listener, you can still get to that destination. It can be really easy to tell yourselves you can't, but for I think the average person, again, for most people, yes, there are extremes to everything, but for most people, you can still get to that destination. Now, another talking point we had here from this book, Josh, was, do you think suffering is necessary for personal transformation? What do you think about that?
I personally don't. I don't think you necessarily have to suffer. I mean, I think in some instances, yeah, but I don't think that's an every time thing. In order to succeed, in order to better yourself, I don't necessarily think you have to suffer every single time. I think maybe the word suffer is just a little harsh. Do you have to put in time and effort? Yeah. Now, is that considered suffering? I don't necessarily. I don't think so. I think putting in work is, I think it's just different, right? I think it's the suffering, the word suffering, that's kind of like throwing me off a little bit, right? But
Well, see,
I
I
think
think you bring up a good point there because I think what a lot of people are going to do with this book, if they haven't already read it, or even if they have, is immediately say something along the lines on the spectrum of what you just said, which is, all right, well, suffering's a bit much, or all right, this is good and all, but like, I don't need to go out there and run 30 30 ultras in 30 days, which I think is something else David did, which is insane. And I would say to the listener, it doesn't have, you don't have to take everything as a literal translation of how it affects what you're personally going through. So like, do you think suffering is necessary for personal transformation? Maybe doesn't mean that you have to suffer in terms of you're losing a limb, right? But in terms of what are those micro moments throughout the day that you could consider suffering?
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Now we had another question here, right? This book emphasizes personal accountability. Where would you say, Josh, is the line between accountability and self-compassion?
All right, now hit me with like, what do you mean by like self-compassion? So like accountability is just saying like, hey, you have stuff to do, and you are basically saying like, you have things to do, and you need to complete those tasks. Now, when I think of like self-compassion, I think of like having grace for yourself. Like it's like, hey, I know I have these things to do, but I know that they don't necessarily need to be done because I've got all these other things. Maybe I just need to take a break. I need to relax, recharge before I go back to holding myself accountable. That's what I think of when I think of like self-compassion and accountability, right? It is kind of like, again, giving yourself grace, but also like knowing you have stuff to do. So I think in that sense, it's like I think being able to decompress, right? A recharge, it's just like going to bed every night, right? It's like say you're studying for a test, right? And you've studied for 2 or 3 hours and you're falling asleep and you're tired. You're going to if you go to bed, get a good quality sleep, you get up, you have breakfast, like you're taking that break, you're taking that well-deserved break, and you're resetting, and then you're going back. You're going to end up, studying better, right? And I think you could say the same thing for anything. Like you're working, right? It's the same thing as like taking a 15-minute break, coming back, and now you're ready to hit it harder, right? You're ready to knock stuff out. So that's what I think about like the line between accountability and self-compassion. What does that kind of jive with what you're thinking, Jared?
Well, I have a follow-up question for you. So, with that example and with those definitions, do you feel like when you give yourself those moments of self-compassion, do you feel like you've truly earned those moments of self-compassion, or do you feel like you could have done a little bit more, you could have pushed yourself a little bit more before giving yourself that grace? Or do you feel like, no, when I give myself those moments of grace, it's because I truly am at that point of exhaustion, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think for me, it's very dependent on the situationally dependent. Like sometimes, yeah, I could probably put in more effort, but it's like, you know, if it's not high on the priority list, it's like I feel less motivated, right? I feel less motivated to knock something
Mm,
out. So I think, I think it comes to almost like, again, a motivational level. Like, is it something that I need done? Is there like a, is there like a deadline that this needs to be done? Is there specific like goals that I need to achieve before I can go on to the next one? So I think it's, for me, it's motivationally driven.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting you say that, right? Because that's a lot of what this book is about, right? Is trying to change that mindset so that we're not going strictly off of motivation and we go off of discipline instead.
Right.
Now, when I see this question, where is the line between accountability and self-compassion? It sparked for me a quote that was on page 11. So we're going to jump back to the front of the book. I think this is even like in the introduction of the book. But the quote reads, "Denial is the ultimate comfort zone." And I think accountability is important. And I do think self-compassion is important. I think, like you mentioned, giving yourself that grace is important in life, making sure that we hold ourselves accountable, but we don't tear ourselves down is important. But I think most of us, and I've definitely am a culprit of this as well, give ourselves this false sense of accomplishment when we really haven't done that much. And we say, I got this task done. So all right, now I'm going to give myself a couple hours on the couch to watch TV, or I worked out a little bit, and so I deserve to have this extremely unhealthy full day of eating or something of that sort, right? Like I've done that. I still work through those moments, right? So no judgment here, because I'm actively a person who is, while we're even talking about this, trying to verbalize that I'm holding myself accountable, right? But I think what David Goggins is trying to tell us is that we give ourselves these false sense of appreciation, and it allows us to stay extremely comfortable with where we're at. Now, if you're somebody that isn't looking to get in better shape, or the work that you did to attain a certain goal, that's not your goal, right? Like getting a podcast going, if that's not your goal, then yeah, why would you be hard on yourself about not putting in the work you could have put in to accomplish that goal? But what I think, and who I think David Goggins is speaking to here, is the person who says they want to accomplish X, Y, and Z in life, and then when they don't accomplish it, are complaining that things didn't go their way, that so and so was holding them back, or they're just super unlucky in life, and because things just don't work out the way they want them to. I think that's the person David Goggins is talking to, and he's saying it's okay to give yourself grace, but in the moments of giving yourself grace, let's make sure you're truly holding yourself accountable and self-assessing to see if you could have done a little bit more, if you could have shown up a little bit early, could you have studied a little bit longer, could you have walked that extra mile. That's what I got from that one, man. I thought that was a really powerful quote and a really good question to ask the listener and to ask the reader. Now, one thing that you highlighted that Goggins talks throughout the entire book, and how he portrays a lot of his own examples, is through pain and through trauma, which does eventually lead to growth. Now, through some of the questions that we had set here, I have a question for you. We'll kind of jump right off the front. Can pain be productive without becoming harmful? What do you think about that?
That's a good one. I think, when you think of pain, I think pain can take probably multiple forms, right? You've got like physical pain, like you go to the gym, you are pushing yourself, right? That pain, that pain can either be a good thing, or it could be, hey, I ended up tearing something. It can be harmful. But it can also be like, like the mental pain, right? The things that people can't see. There's no like necessarily, there's no like visual thing that you can wrap your head around, like why, like what that pain is. And that, I think pain can be productive, right? I mean, I think you see David, who has had these like traumatic events and he overcomes, right? But I think in most cases, this is tough, man. But yeah, I do think pain can be productive without becoming
Okay.
harmful. I think that it happens a lot less, right? Especially when we're talking about like the mental pain and trauma that we go through. I think that has less of a probability of becoming productive. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That does make sense. And these are definitely some tough, thought provoking questions for sure. And I agree. I think pain can be productive without becoming harmful, but I do think it's a fine line. I do think this is one of those things where, for the average person, it can be really, really hard to teeter that line and not go into the harmful side. Um, in terms of its productivity, that being pain, I think it comes down to, well, how much are you willing to listen, right? How much are you willing to listen to the body? How much are you willing to self reflect on the situation you're in and do so immediately in the moment, so that whatever short term pain you're going through doesn't become something that's more long term, which then I would believe tends to correlate with being more harmful, right? I think where a lot of us, and again, this is, I can speak from personal experience here, you go through something in the moment, whether it's a ache in the knee or a frustration about not getting to, really cutting it close to getting to work on time and having to rush. All right, that's a short term instance of pain, whether it be physical or emotional. Now, if I self reflect on that pain in the moment and I learn from it and I see how I can improve, and what I can do to not let that happen again or reduce the risk of that happening again, then that is a productive amount of pain. But I think what a lot of us do is we take that short instance, we maybe blame others, or we say, I'll deal with this later. I'll push it aside and deal with it later. And what happens? The next day, you do the same thing. The next day, you do the same thing. Now you have a couple weeks of having those short-term instances of pain happening every day. Okay, now it's become a little bit more long-term, and now it's becoming harmful. Now, like you, kind of going off of what you were segueing to, right? What should we or should we not try to push through? Now, I'm a physical therapist, so if it's sharp and if it's tingling or numbness, don't push through that pain. I'm gonna just go on ahead and lead with that. But getting away from that, again, being a little bit more, or a little bit less, taking, not taking words as literal. I would say that there's still, yes, of course, there's certain pain that you should not try to push through in life. I think sometimes when we try to push through things, and especially if we're not pushing through, or if we're trying to push through certain things in life with maybe the wrong circle around us, or we're trying to do it alone, I think there's moments where it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to take a step back and just give yourself a reset day, right? And say, okay, look, I'm not going to keep pushing through, because you can get to a point where you're just not being productive anymore, right? If I'm trying to solve a problem and I'm just staring at it, staring at it, and staring at it for hours, you get to a point where you're not even fully engaged. You're just angry, you're frustrated, you're upset. Like, why push through that moment when you can say, okay, let me take a step back. Let me allow my brain to get stimulated doing something else. And then we can come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, fresh set of ears, fresh mindset.
Right.
So I definitely
Sometimes you just
think
need.
yeah,
I was gonna say sometimes you just need a moment of just like reflection, right?
for sure, for sure. And so I think that's those moments where it's like, yeah, let's not push through it. Let's take that step back. Let's kind of give ourselves that grace that we were talking about before, right? That self compassion, and then you can come back to it stronger and better than ever. Um, Now, he does this thing where he is proud of the things he's suffered through, right? And so, which not saying he shouldn't be, but I think he's proud of overcoming them. I don't think he's proud of having to put himself in those situations to begin with, but I think he's proud of overcoming them. Uh, does the book risk glorifying suffering as a whole, Josh, or do you think he does a good job reframing suffering?
Uh so this is probably my this is where I thought the book faltered because in my opinion,
Mm,
I thought David made his situation, as far as like, not necessarily everyone's going to face the same things, but everyone should be able to overcome just like he did. And that was kind of, I think, where
Mm,
he kind of lost me multiple times. He was going through things. He's like, "Well, I did it, so can you. This is how you do it." And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes words are just words, and I feel like they have less meaning because of that. Like, I yeah, I couldn't get behind, somehow his suffering, and how, yeah, you need to fail in order to succeed type mentality. Like, yeah, I don't know. It didn't really sit well with me.
yeah, I would just say, this kind of goes back to what I touched on earlier, where I think it's one of those situations where if you take everything that he talks about literal
Right.
and you try to exactly go one for one comparing his situation to yours, then I think you are going to miss a lot of what the book is trying to communicate.
Yeah.
So I hear you. And I do think that everybody's situation is different. I think no two situations are the same. You can never fully put yourself in somebody else's shoes, but try your best when you guys are going through this book, reading it, rereading it. Again, David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. Try not to take everything extremely literal when you're reading it, but I hear you. I hear you. Now, motivation and discipline, right? Really what this book is all about. Now, you mentioned something earlier about you are able to really hold yourself accountable and when you're most motivated. And I would say David Goggins is not even himself is not a motivated person. I feel like I've even heard him say that. And I hope, David
Right.
Goggins, if you ever even hear this, I hope I'm not misinterpreting what you're saying. But I'm pretty sure I've heard him say in interviews, he himself is not motivated. He does not want to get up and run every day. He hates running, right? But he's a multi ultra marathoner. He doesn't really like always exercising as a whole, right? But he gets up and he does it anyway. And that's where you have to balance those two between motivation and discipline. Motivation can be a phenomenal way to be that fire starter, but if you don't have the right processes in place to maintain and to stay consistent with what it is you're trying to do, then you're going to fall into exactly where they mention on page 12, the fact that you're not actually changing, right? Motivation changes exactly nobody. It might help you start, but it's not motivation that's going to keep you going. That's where that discipline has to come into play. And another great quote we found from this is on page 122, where it reads, "Ticket to victory often comes down to bringing your very best when you feel your worst." Meaning those mornings where, right, this is a perfect example. It's January, right? What is the stereotypical thing people love to talk about in January? Is their new goals, their resolutions, right? Well, what are you going to do when the honeymoon phase of setting a new goal or resolution weans off, right? What are you going to do when it fades away? Are you going to be able to still stick to the plan that you created and execute on that plan or not? Now, another question for you, Josh. What habits in your own life do you feel like would benefit from discipline benefit more from discipline than just motivation?
Oh man, I've got something I guess I'm currently trying to better myself in is, you know, in my current job, in my current finance job, like there is always so much new, there's always something to learn, right? We work with all types of different, finance departments, and some of it can be very complicated, going from like the accounting team over to the actuarial team. And there's so much that like I truly don't understand. And I think this is where discipline would help me, right? Because I don't necessarily need to learn this math. I'm not the one, that's like doing the day-to-day stuff, but like the discipline of like just bettering myself. I think that's where like being able to go and have like one-on-one conversations to like, be able to comprehend what's going on and be able to like, put stuff into practice for myself, that way I can, you know, I can test, like, whatever they're saying, I can go back and I can test it myself and make sure it makes sense for me. So I think that's where I think discipline over motivation would benefit me in my current life, is just being able to, really take time out of my day and, like, basically learn new habits, right? Learn new habits that aren't necessarily, I don't need, but that I just want to be, I want to be sufficient in.
I like that, man. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Kind of going feeding right into that, right? How do we apply these things? How do we reflect on them? And one of the things that we've already touched on, right, that David Goggins really talks about in this book, he calls it, based off of his verbiage from being in the military, after action reports, or AARs, right? And that's that ability to have that moment of self-reflection, right? So you go through something in life, good or bad, have that moment of self-reflection in order to learn from that. Again, the good and the bad, learn from both scenarios and see what you can do to improve even further. And then one of my favorite rules that he talks about in this book, if you go to page 210 in the book, guys, one of my favorite things he talks about is the 40% rule. And again, it's a mindset, guys. I don't think this is backed by science per se, but it's just a mindset, something to consider. And that's the 40% rule, being that most of us, when we're ready to give up, when that initial inkling of like, all right, let me just try again another time, or let me finish this later, or maybe not today, maybe later in life we'll accomplish this, but today's not that day. Most of us have only given 40%. So you have a whole nother 60% to unlock there, Josh. And when we can really try our best to unlock that extra 60%, who do we become? One of my other favorite quotes from this book, we become, excuse me, see, I'm getting excited, so I'm getting tripped up on my words here.
Passionate, guys. Passionate.
We become uncommon among uncommon men. I love.
So what are we talking, like creme de la
man.
creme, like top like
exactly that, man. You are becoming, in a room full of badasses. That doesn't have to be physical, guys. It doesn't have to mean that you can do the most push-ups or the most pull-ups, or you can run the fastest, or bench the most, right? That's not what we're talking about here. It can mean a bunch of things. It can mean financially. It can mean mentally. It can mean spiritually, emotionally, right? That emotional IQ, becoming uncommon among uncommon men. Overall, man, great book. Really, really good book. Super excited, Josh, to get your overall rating on the book.
I do want to just ask one question quick before we get into it. Because again, this book, I mean, just hearing his stories, hearing like what he went through, I was fascinated at just everything he accomplished, or everything he like set out to accomplish. And what I want to know, and I want the listeners, please feel free, send a comment. What do you think was the craziest thing David Goggins did? And in your opinion, do you think you could have accomplished any of those things too?
Those are good questions right there, man. Those are really good questions. Yeah, you guys, the listeners, let us know what you think. Are you asking me personally, or something we want to just hear from the listeners?
Of course, I want to hear what your take as well.
I think one of mine is, and I think it's in the book, or it was from an interview of his. I briefly mentioned it. I mean, going through buds. All right, like, I'm not in the military. I have zero military experience. Only thing I know about the military is that I have family members that served in the military. I have no idea what buds is like, but from what he describes it, and from what I loosely hear other people talk about, that's intense. And he went through Navy SEAL training 3 times in 1 year. He went through it once where he quit. He said he lied about not being able to continue, so that he could get pulled due to a medical issue. So he quit once, and then was able to then go back, did it a second time. They pulled him in the second time, and then he did it a third time and completed it. That's just wild to me. That's absolutely insane. Again, I have no idea what that's like, but that just sounds crazy. But I think for me is just, and again, I think this is in this book. It might be in his next one, but I think it's in this book, or I've heard it on interviews. But one of the things if you pull up, he'll show you a resume of how many ultras he did in like a 30 or 60 day period. And I think it was an insane number of ultras that he did in a 30-day period. I can't remember the exact number. I don't want to misspeak. It's like 30 ultras in like 45 days or something like that. It's just wild to do. We're talking 100 milers, 200 milers, like some of the hardest ultras in the world. Just absolutely wild, man. To me, that's the crazy thing he's done. Could I ever come close to that?
You're saying the ultra marathon over the SEAL training.
Doing that many consecutive ultra marathons, and yes, that's my vote. Again, I'm ignorantly saying I don't know much about the SEAL training. I know he described it as being something extremely difficult, and doing that 3 times in 1 year is impressive. I'm not taking anything away from that. But just based on what you asked me, the consecutive amount of ultras that he did in such a short time span, for me, is the craziest thing, personally. And then do I realistically think I could come close to accomplishing that? Well, Josh, I would not be me, especially post reading Can't Hurt Me, if I didn't tell you, hell yeah, I could come close to that, man. I could do that if I train for it hard enough, if I work hard enough, and I work hard enough long enough. I 100% could do that. Never say never, man.
You hear that, David Goggins? Jared's coming for you. He's coming for you.
Now, for you, what's the craziest thing?
Oh man, I gotta say, obviously the SEAL training is unbelievable. He went through Delta training too. I thought just the fact that he was just lifting again. You said he was like, maxing out or hitting his PRs for weightlifting, and then the next day decides, hey, I'm gonna go run 100+ miles and with nothing but like 2 or 3 protein shakes. That I thought was the craziest thing. That is the craziest thing he did by far. Like I don't know.
And for those that don't know, purely going to like 1 rep max type of working out takes a lot out of you, right? It's not that you're just lifting any weight one time. You are building up to and truly giving everything your body possibly has to offer to push whatever that weight is. And so to do that and then use completely different parts of your nervous system, different parts of your muscle fibers, to then go run 100 miles the next day with less than 24 hours recovery and with zero like significant training is insane. I mean, that is like so impressive. And then right, to push through what he talks about as like peeing and defecating on himself because he was so dehydrated, practically going into kidney failure, like to push yourself to that limit. I don't think too many of us could actually push ourselves to the limit where we are bordering death. He's done it multiple times, which is wild.
Right.
Oh man.
So yeah, that's I think the craziest thing he's done. Again, nice, really curious to hear what you guys say. We'd love to hear your input, your take on everything. But hey, overall, Jared, I mean, again, I thought this was a fun book. So I guess the next is let's go over our ratings.
Yeah, man. Let's go. What you got? You have for those that can't see it, Josh has a 6.5 rating out of 10. It's kind of low, Josh. Talk to me here. What's going on with your 6.5 rating?
All right, so I might have to
disguise my voice a little bit, just so that David Goggins doesn't know that I rated him this low. But I gave it a 6.5.
I personally think that it's good. I thought the stories were fascinating, and I just, again, this being my first like self-improvement book, like I'm not good with like when someone's just like, you can do it, like just be better. Like, I don't know. I found like that was tough to overcome. You know, some of the challenges I was like, I don't really agree with. But in reality, you know, after reflecting on like this entire actually the book club, this book is probably made for someone like me that's like, oh, this doesn't, you know, this doesn't hold, like this is stupid. In reality, like I should be taking a lot from this. So I gave it a 6.5 because I don't necessarily like agree with everything he said. I thought the stories were really interesting, but I think trying to like box everyone in the same, like put everyone in the same box, I just, it was tough for me. But like I said, now kind of like having heard, you know, Jared, I want to give you a little bit of a round of applause because I thought you were very you know, a lot of your insights were very, you know, thoughtful and well thought out. And you might have actually changed me a little bit. Like I said, I think this book was probably made for someone like me now who was fighting it tooth and nail every step of the way. So yeah, I did give it a 6.5, but I might have to reevaluate that.
Okay. Now, Josh gave us 6.5. Clearly, I chose the book. So just off the jump, probably a little bias, a little bit more enthusiasm to get started reading the book after we initially chose this one. I gave David Goggins Can't Hurt Me an 8 out of 10. Now, I don't think David Goggins would even respect a 10 out of 10. I think he would be like, that's BS. Tell me something I can do better. Okay. So out of respect for David Goggins, I refuse to give him a 10 out of 10.
What happened to 9?
Huh?
I said, why not a 9 then?
So I got my reasons. You know, look, nobody's perfect. And although I love the book, I think it's a phenomenal read. I think everybody should read it and going into it with the mindset of trying to learn from it, not trying to take it very literal. The reason why I did not give it a 9 out of 10, to answer your question, Josh, is I had a hard time with, I appreciate the challenges that he had at the end of each chapter. I think it's a way to be interactive with the community. I think it's a way to just kind of further push you to get outside of your comfort zone. But he puts in there at times with those challenges like, hey, let's post about it, let's talk about it. But I'm an avid fan of David Goggins. I've seen a lot of his interviews, and it just seemed a little bit contradictory to who he is as a person, like wanting to really engage with people and like and having these like this social media following, because he kind of talks about how much he doesn't care about a social media following at the same time. So I just thought that was a little contradictory to kind of what I've seen him talk about in interviews a little bit there. And then the other reason why I just didn't give it a 10 out of 10, although again, I love the book, it was hard, right? It was hard to try to find a takeaway that I could relate to my life and at every single point of the book.
Like just connecting in general, right?
Yeah. And not to say like, hey, not to say somebody else won't connect even more than I did. I mean, I haven't gone through all of the experiences that he's gone through. But there were certain moments where I felt like, okay, you know, I see his understanding. I feel like I now have a better understanding of why he has or how he has become the person he is. But at the end of the day, there are certain things that I don't recommend people doing that I think might be a little bit more detrimental to the average person. And maybe that's my biased physical therapy, healthcare background, but it is what it is. Nonetheless, phenomenal read. Highly, highly recommend. So between Josh and I, we gave it an average of technically 7.25, but we're going to round up here, 7.3 out of 10. Josh, we have concluded with Can't Hurt Me. Ooh. Tell the people, especially the listeners that don't get a chance to see the screen, tell the people what book you chose next.
I chose a nice, light, easy read. It is Stephen King, 11/22/63. If you have not started, please start now. It's a doozy. It's a doozy.
Oh man, this is a long one.
It's a long one. It's, you know, again, it's a dainty 800-page book. You know, it should be a nice, you know, afternoon read. But we're excited to talk about that next. again, book club, first one in the books. Jared, like I said, I think you killed it on this one. You know, a lot of really thought-provoking questions. Excited to see, you know, what you have in the arsenal next. And honestly, before we close out, one of the things that we are going to do is if we have a book that we both feel is, you know, at least a 9 out of 10 average, we're going to give it the old armchair analysis stamp of approval.
That's right.
And final thing before we go, David Goggins, again, Jared is challenging you to a pull-up competition.
Yeah, right.
David, come on. Yeah, you don't walk away from a challenge.
Yeah, right. That'd be nice. That'd be nice. But hey, man, no, David Goggins, appreciate you. Thank you for writing this book, man. If we ever do get the chance to meet you, if this ever comes across your feed somehow, some way, we would really appreciate the shout out. But more than anything, thank you. And certainly excited for you guys to dive into Stephen King's 11/22/63. In a previous episode, I had mentioned that a TV show is coming out about 11/22/63. It is, I was partially wrong, partially right. There is a TV show coming out, but it is not a new TV show. I think it just got, you know, picked up on syndication or something, but I have been seeing it advertised. I can't remember the streaming service, so you guys can Google that. But yeah, 11/22/63. It is a good read. Okay, it was out of my. I can certainly say it was out of my comfort zone, but was a good read nonetheless. I do feel like there are some good things you can take from it as well, which maybe helped me get through it. But excited for you guys to stay on this book club journey with us. And Josh, I'm going to give us both a round of applause for starting a book club. I don't think either one of us from you know, our high school selves, that picture you showed earlier, would have ever thought we would be starting a book club together. So kudos to both of us, man. I'm proud of us.
Yep. 12 books, 12 months. We're doing it.
Let's go, baby. Let's go. All right, guys. Till next time.
Y'all come back now, you hear?